That night he demanded I kneel and apologize to his female best friend. I agreed, and brought her husband along to listen. It took me exactly 7 minutes to transform my apology into a confession transcript, complete with evidence of an $85,000 secret he'd signed away himself. When the electronic locks on her new wellness center automatically changed ownership at 9 a mile, wham! Everyone finally understood why women like me never bow our heads to the truth. My name is Julia Hart, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a freelance brand designer from our 2-bedroom apartment in Maple Ridge, Ohio, a town small enough that everyone knows your coffee order, but large enough to pretend they don't notice when your marriage is falling apart. Brandon Cole, my husband of 6 years, manages operations at Everline Freight Co., a regional shipping company downtown. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue, he was the guy who helped clean up without being asked, who remembered everyone's names, who texted to make sure I got home safe. Those little considerations felt like promises back then. We'd built our life on shared foundations: joint checking, joint savings, a house fund we'd nicknamed the Dream Jar, even though it was just digits on a screen. Every month, we'd review our finances together over Chinese takeout, Brandon making spreadsheets while I sketched logo concepts for clients. It felt like partnership. Then Tessa Grant moved back to town. "She's just an old friend from college," Brandon explained that first evening, his phone lighting up with her third text in an hour. "She's been through a rough patch with her consulting business in Chicago. Just needs some friendly faces while she gets settled." Tessa was the kind of woman who wore silk scarves as headbands and whose laugh could cut through restaurant noise. She'd married Nolan Reed, an auditor who spoke in numbers and looked at his wife like she was an equation he couldn't quite solve. Within a week of their return, she'd landed a client development role at a local marketing firm and somehow acquired a spare key to our apartment. "For emergencies," Brandon had said, not meeting my eyes when I found it missing from the hook by our door. The red flags started small, like paper cuts you don't notice until they sting. Tuesday lunches appeared on Brandon's calendar, lunch catch-up, blocked from noon to 2 p.m., religiously protected. His phone, once casually abandoned on counters and coffee tables, became an extension of his palm. Work calls that used to happen at his desk migrated to our garage, his voice dropping to frequencies I couldn't catch through the door. "It's just Everline stuff," he'd say, emerging 40 minutes later. "You know how paranoid corporate gets about trade routes." Except Everline Freight didn't ship anything that required hushed 11 p.m. strategy sessions. Our 6th anniversary fell on a Thursday. I'd made reservations at Marchisa's, the Italian place where we'd had our third date. I'd even worn the green dress he'd once said made my eyes look like sea glass. We'd made it through the appetizers when his phone buzzed. Then again. Then a call. "I'm so sorry, babe," Brandon said, already standing. "Tessa's having a crisis with her landlord. Something about the lease terms. She's really upset." "Can't Nolan handle it?" I asked, my voice steady as my fettuccine cooled on its plate. "He's out of town for an audit. I'll be quick, I promise. 20 minutes. Tops." He kissed my forehead, that patronizing gesture that says I'm being unreasonable without words, and left. I finished my dinner alone, the waitress kindly not mentioning the empty chair when she brought the check. When he came home 2 hours later, smelling of wine he hadn't drunk at dinner, I was already in bed with the lights off. He slipped in beside me, murmuring apologies into my hair, explaining how Tessa had been so grateful, how she really needed a friend right now, how I was the best for understanding. "You're making this into something it's not," he said when I suggested boundaries the next morning, maybe a heads up before visits, perhaps keeping calls to business hours. "This is what adults do, Julia. We have friendships. We help people. Don't you trust me?" The question hung between us like a test I was destined to fail either way. Say no, and I'm the jealous wife manufacturing drama. Say yes, and I'm agreeing to my own invisibility. I chose silence instead and started paying attention. They had inside jokes now, references to conversations I'd never heard. Tessa would touch his arm when she laughed, letting her fingers linger just a beat too long. At group dinners, they'd gravitate toward each other, their conversation creating a bubble that somehow never had room for a third. "You're imagining things," Brandon said when I mentioned it. "You're letting your insecurity create problems where there aren't any. Maybe you should talk to someone about this jealousy issue." The gaslighting was gentle, almost caring, wrapped in concern for my mental health, my happiness, our marriage. He'd hold me afterward, tell me he loved me, that I was the only one for him, and for brief moments. I'd believe him, but Tuesday lunches never moved, late-night texts never stopped, and that spare key. It started getting used when I wasn't home, evidenced by Tessa's perfume lingering in our living room, her coffee cup in our sink, her presence seeping into spaces that used to be ours. I decided to stop arguing and start observing. After all, the best evidence against gaslighting is a clear view of the flames. The Tuesday lunches became a religion Brandon wouldn't miss. Not for my birthday lunch, not for his own doctor's appointment, not even when I called crying because my biggest client had just terminated our contract. "I'm so sorry, babe, but I already promised Tessa. She's counting on me," he'd said that day, his voice tinged with impatience. "Can we talk about it tonight? I'm sure it's not as bad as you think." It was worse, actually. But by that evening, he'd forgotten to ask. Tessa's presence in our apartment escalated from occasional to routine. Her Wi-Fi issues seemed chronic, requiring her to work from our dining table twice a week. Package deliveries for her arrived at our door. "The delivery guy knows this address better," she'd explain with that crystalline laugh. She'd reorganized our spice rack one afternoon because it was driving her crazy. She'd even left a toothbrush in our bathroom, tucked behind Brandon's electric razor like it belonged there. "You're being territorial," Brandon said when I moved it to the hall closet. "It's just a toothbrush. Julia. She was here early for a work thing and needed to freshen up. Why are you making this weird—" The conversations followed a script now. I'd express discomfort. He'd reframe it as my problem. I'd provide specific examples. He'd explain why each one was actually proof of my irrationality. Round and round we went, until I felt dizzy from spinning in circles of my own supposed jealousy. The gaslighting had layers, like a parfait of manipulation. First came the dismissal. "That didn't happen the way you remember it." Then the concern. "I'm worried about you, babe. This paranoia isn't healthy." Finally, the threat wrapped in sympathy. "If you can't trust me, what kind of marriage do we have?" One Thursday evening, I suggested couples therapy. Brandon laughed, not cruelly, but worse, with genuine amusement. "Therapy. Because I have a female friend, Julia. Come on. We're not those people. We don't need some stranger telling us how to be married." He pulled me onto his lap, kissed my temple. "Besides, Tessa says therapy can actually make things worse if there's no real problem to begin with. It creates issues where there aren't any." "Since when does Tessa have opinions about our marriage?" I asked. "She doesn't. She was just sharing what happened with her sister's relationship. Don't twist everything into something sinister." But Tessa did have opinions. They leaked through Brandon's mouth at unexpected moments. "Tessa thinks you'd be happier if you went back to office work." "Tessa says creative types often struggle with stability." "Tessa mentioned there's a yoga class that helps with anxiety." Our weekly financial reviews became Brandon's solo project. "You've got enough on your plate with the client loss," he'd said, taking over the laptop. "Let me handle the boring money stuff for a while." I should have pushed back. Should have insisted. But I was tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from constantly questioning your own reality. So I let him manage our finances while I scrambled to replace lost income, to salvage my professional reputation, to hold myself together with whatever energy remained. The night everything shifted was a Tuesday. Of course. Brandon had left his laptop on the kitchen counter. Slack still open, calendar visible. The lunch block with Tessa had extended to 3 p.m., then 4 p.m., with a note, "Riverway Bistro usual table." Usual table? They had a usual table. I photographed the screen with my phone. a reflex born from weeks of being told my memory was faulty. Evidence, I was learning, was my only ally in a war where reality itself was disputed territory. That evening, I experimented. "How was lunch with Tessa?" I asked, chopping vegetables with deliberate calm. "Good. Quick. Just grabbed sandwiches near her office." Not Riverway Bistro. His pause was microscopic, but I caught it. "Why would you think that?" "Just wondering. You mentioned wanting to try it last week." "Oh, right. No, just sandwiches today." I nodded, added the carrots to the pan, and filed away my first confirmed lie. The smaller deceptions unveiled themselves once I started looking. Charges on our joint card that didn't match his stories. Tuesday, work emergencies, when Everline's dispatch system showed no issues. A cologne sample from Nordstrom that appeared in his briefcase, the kind of thing you pick up shopping with someone. Not alone. "You're keeping tabs on me now," he'd asked when I'd wondered aloud about the cologne. "That's not healthy, Julia. That's actually kind of scary." What's next? Hiring a private investigator. But I didn't need an investigator. I just needed his laptop again. And patience. The universe delivered both on a Sunday morning when Brandon left for an emergency at the warehouse, leaving his computer open on the coffee table. His email was logged in, password manager active in oversight he'd regret. I had 2 hours, maybe 3, more than enough time to understand exactly what kind of fool I'd been. The folder was labeled personal, hidden 3 layers deep in his documents, like a secret he'd barely bothered to protect. My hands were steady as I clicked it open, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Photos loaded first. Selfies from Riverway Bistro. Tessa leaning into frame. Brandon's arm around her shoulders. Their usual table was by the window. I noted, with the river view we'd always said we'd try. More pictures, Tessa trying on sunglasses while Brandon laughed. The 2 of them at what looked like a wine tasting. A sunset photo from Maple Ridge Park. Their shadows merged into one. The timestamp on that last one read 2:43 a.m. On a Wednesday, the night Brandon had said Everline's servers crashed. I screenshot everything, emailing copies to 3 different accounts I'd created that morning, then uploaded them to 2 separate cloud drives. Paranoid maybe. But gaslighting had taught me that evidence could disappear as quickly as my supposed peace of mind. The messages came next, archived in a subfolder called Conversations. My stomach turned as I read, "Can't stop thinking about lunch. You looked beautiful in that blue dress." Sent at 11:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. "If I'd met you first." This one from Tessa. Sent at 2 a.m. "Jules doesn't understand me the way you do." My nickname, diminished to a comparison. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd chosen each other back then." From Brandon. Sent while I was asleep beside him. The emotional affair spread across months of messages, each one a small betrayal adding up to complete devastation. But I kept reading, kept documenting, transforming heartbreak into data points. Then I found the credit card statements. Our joint card showed patterns I'd missed while trusting him with our finances. Every Tuesday, $60 to $70 at Riverway Bistro. A $200 charge at Stella's Jewelry labeled gift. $300 at the wine merchant with a date that matched Tessa's promotion celebration. A promotion Brandon had never mentioned to me. But those wounds were scratches compared to what I found next. Buried in his email, dated 3 weeks ago, was a PDF contract operating agreement for Hearth and Harbor Wellness LLC. My blood chilled as I read the member listing Julia Hart, managing member, 90% ownership, my social security number, my address, my supposed signature on the DocuSign. I had never seen this document before. The capital contribution section made me dizzy. $85,000 transferred from our joint savings. Our house fund, our dream jar, our future, liquidated and poured into Tessa's new wellness center. Supporting documents revealed the full scope. Lease agreements for a commercial space on Market Street, equipment orders for massage tables, saunas, essential oil diffusers, marketing materials featuring Tessa's photo and describing her as a wellness entrepreneur bringing holistic healing to Maple Ridge. Brandon had forged my signature, used my information to make me the legal owner likely for tax advantages or credit purposes while funding his emotional affair partner's business dreams with our money. I found the bank statements next. The transfer had been broken into smaller amounts over 2 weeks, each just under the limit that would trigger additional verification. Methodical, planned, deliberate. My phone camera worked overtime as I documented everything. Email threads where Brandon and Tessa discussed the investment in coded language. Lease documents where my name appeared as guarantor. The DocuSign audit trail showing Brandon's IP address and device ID for my supposed signature. A new email popped up as I worked. From Tessa to Brandon, can't wait for the soft opening next month. You've made all my dreams possible. Last night was incredible. N still doesn't suspect anything. Last night, when Brandon had been at his company's quarterly planning session until 1 a.m., I kept my breathing steady, my movements calm, even as rage crystallized into something sharper. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft, fraud, criminal. But I wasn't done investigating. Brandon's browser history revealed meetings with contractors, appointments at the wellness center space, even a shopping trip to pick out reception desk furniture. Our life had become a performance where I was the only one who didn't know it was staged. Cross-referencing his calendar with bank statements painted the full picture. Those Tuesday lunches were planning sessions. The late-night calls were business discussions about their business. The weekend warehouse emergencies matched perfectly with contractor meetings at the Market Street property. A text buzzed on his laptop, leaving in 5, love you, from Tessa. On a Sunday morning, when her husband Nolan was supposedly home, I had maybe 10 minutes. I initiated one final search, finding the LLC's bank account information. The balance showed $72,000 remaining, plus equipment and inventory worth another $40,000 according to recent purchase orders. Assets. Hidden assets in my legal name. I closed everything carefully, cleared the recent documents list, and positioned the laptop exactly as I'd found it. My phone held gigabytes of evidence. My mind held something more valuable clarity. When Brandon walked in 15 minutes later, I was reading on the couch, looking as vacant as he'd been telling me I was. Hey, babe, he said, kissing my forehead. Warehouse is all sorted. Want to grab brunch? Sure, I smiled. Riverway Bistro. Nah, he said without flinching. That place is overpriced. Let's just do the diner. As he showered, humming off-key, I texted an old college friend, know any good divorce lawyers in Ohio? She replied immediately, Maris Lang at Lang & Doyle. She's a shark. Everything okay? It will be. I typed back, then deleted the conversation. Everything was about to be more than okay. It was about to be legally mine. The ultimatum came on a Thursday evening, 3 days after my discovery. Brandon had been edgy all week, perhaps sensing a shift in the air between us, the way animals sense earthquakes before they strike. We need to talk, he announced, standing in our living room like he was about to deliver a corporate presentation. I set down my laptop, giving him my full attention. You've been cold and distant lately, he began. And honestly, Julia, your jealousy about Tessa has become toxic. It's affecting my work, my friendships, my mental health. I stayed silent, letting him build his case. She told me what you did, he continued, following her to the grocery store. Really, she was terrified. I hadn't left the house that day, but I didn't correct him. Let him pile up the lies. Every word was ammunition. So here's what's going to happen. Brandon squared his shoulders, executive mode fully engaged. You're going to apologize to Tessa, face to face. Take responsibility for your behavior and promise to respect our friendship. Or, I asked, voice neutral as water. Or I'm filing for divorce. I can't live like this anymore, with someone who doesn't trust me, who makes up stories, who stalks my friends. He pulled out his phone, showed me a draft email to a lawyer. I'm serious. Julia, I've already started the paperwork. I studied his face, the man I'd married. Now a stranger wielding our marriage like a weapon. When would this apology happen? Tomorrow night, at her place. 7 p.m. He relaxed slightly, mistaking my calm for capitulation. She's graciously agreed to hear you out despite everything. I want Nolan there, I said. If I'm apologizing for affecting your friendship, her husband should hear it too. For transparency? Brandon hesitated, then nodded. Fine. That's actually mature of you. I'll need talking points, I continued, playing the defeated wife perfectly. So I don't mess it up. What specifically should I apologize for? His eyes lit up the controller's joy when control seems absolute. He actually pulled out his phone and started typing a list. Acknowledge your jealousy is unfounded. Admit you've been projecting your insecurities. Take responsibility for creating tension. Promise to respect boundaries going forward. Recognize that platonic friendships are healthy. Shh, he sent it to my email. Memorize this. Don't go off script. I understand, I said. I'll apologize properly. Good. He kissed my forehead, that same patronizing gesture. I knew you'd see reason. This will be good for us, Julia. You'll see. After he went to bed, I texted Nolan from my laptop using a Google Voice number. This is Julia Hart. I need you to be home tomorrow at 7 p.m. It's important you hear what I have to say about Brandon and Tessa. Please don't mention this message to anyone. His response came at 1:12 a.m. I'll be there. The next morning, I called Maris Lang's office. I need an emergency consultation. I told her assistant. Regarding fraud, theft, and divorce, I have extensive documentation. Ms. Lang can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring everything. Perfect timing, I said, looking at Brandon's script. The situation should be much clearer by then. Brandon spent Friday coaching me like I was preparing for a performance review. Remember, you're sorry for your behavior, not suspicious anymore. You trust me. You trust our marriage. I understand exactly what I need to say, I assured him. He even picked out my outfit, a conservative sweater and slacks. You want to look non-threatening, he explained. Approachable. Sorry. The drive to Tessa's townhouse felt like approaching a stage. Brandon talked the whole way, reinforcing my lines, reminding me what was at stake. If this goes well, we can move past everything. Start fresh. Maybe even be friends with them as a couple. I made appropriate sounds of agreement while mentally reviewing my actual script, the one written in evidence and receipts. Tessa answered the door wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse, her expression magnificently condescending. Julia, thank you for coming. She said it like she was granting an audience. The living room was staged for my humiliation, Tessa and Brandon on the love seat, 2 chairs facing them like a tribunal. Wine glasses and a cheese board on the coffee table, as if this were a social occasion. Nolan sat in the corner, laptop open, barely looking up when we entered. Working, he muttered. Don't mind me. But his eyes were alert, waiting. So, Tessa prompted, settling next to Brandon with practiced grace. Brandon said you had something to say to me. I remained standing, pulled out my phone. Yes, Brandon's right. I owe you an apology. Brandon nodded encouragingly. Tessa leaned back, savoring her moment. I'm sorry, I began, voice clear and steady, for staying silent while I watched an emotional affair destroy 2 marriages. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. What the hell? Brandon started. I'm not done apologizing. I cut him off, turning to Nolan. You should probably close that laptop. You'll want to see this. I held up my phone, swiping through photos on the screen so Nolan could see clearly. Tessa and Brandon at their usual table. The late-night messages. The sunset embrace. I'm sorry for not speaking up during all those Tuesday lunches at Riverway Bistro, for staying quiet about the texts at 2 a.m. I read aloud. If I'd met you first. Jules doesn't understand me the way you do. Nolan had stood now, face carved from stone. How long? Months, I said, still swiping. Here's the receipt for the jewelry, the wine shopping, the planning sessions for— Julia, stop, Brandon commanded, his executive voice cracking. You're taking everything out of context. Context, I turned to him. Let me provide the full context then. I pulled up the LLC documents on my phone, displaying them like evidence in court. 3 weeks ago, you stole $85,000 from our savings, our house fund. You forged my signature to make me the legal owner of Hearth and Harbor Wellness LLC, Tessa's new business. The silence that followed felt like the moment between lightning and thunder, charged, inevitable, waiting to explode. That's not— you don't understand, Brandon stammered, his corporate composure crumbling like wet cardboard. I understand perfectly, I said, holding up the phone so everyone could see the DocuSign audit trail. IP address traceable to your laptop, device ID matching your phone, my signature that I never signed, authorizing the transfer of our entire savings into a business I didn't know existed. Tessa had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. Brandon, what is she talking about? Oh, he didn't tell you. I turned to her with mock surprise. You're not the owner of Hearth and Harbor Wellness. I am. 90%. According to these documents Brandon so helpfully filed. Nolan moved closer, taking my phone to examine the evidence himself. His jaw tightened with each swipe. This is dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He looked at his wife. When you said the investor came through. When you celebrated with champagne? Nolan, honey, it's not what it looks like. Tessa started. It's exactly what it looks like, I interrupted. Every Tuesday wasn't just lunch. Every late-night call wasn't about work. And that wellness center you're so proud of. Tessa, it's built on fraud. Brandon stood abruptly, trying to reclaim control. This is ridiculous. Julia, you're having some kind of breakdown. Sit down, Nolan commanded, his auditor voice sharp as a blade. Brandon, surprisingly, sat. I continued my presentation, swiping to the bank statements. 85,000, transferred in increments to avoid detection. See the pattern. Every amount just under 10,000. That's deliberate structuring to evade federal reporting requirements. That's not just fraud, it's a federal crime. You authorized those transfers, Brandon protested weakly. We're married. It's joint property, which requires joint consent, I countered. And forging my signature on business documents, that's identity theft, wire fraud, and about 6 other felonies a good prosecutor could name. Nolan had his own phone out now, taking photos of my evidence. Send me everything, he said quietly. Every document, every message, every receipt. Already done, I said, having airdropped the entire folder to him while speaking. Check your downloads. Tessa reached for Brandon's hand, but he pulled away. They were fracturing in real time, their united front collapsing under the weight of exposed truth. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Brandon muttered. The business was a good investment. Julia would have said no. She's so risk-averse. I was doing it for us, for our future. Our future. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the future where you leave me for her once the business is profitable, once my credit and reputation have built her dream. We never. Tessa started to protest. Nothing physical happened. Last night was incredible, I quoted from her message. Sent yesterday at 7:43 when exactly did Brandon leave your bed? Tessa. Nolan's expression turned volcanic. You said you were at book club last night. The lies were colliding now, creating a spectacular pileup of deception. Brandon and Tessa kept looking at each other, trying to coordinate their stories telepathically. But it was too late. The evidence was too overwhelming, too specific. Here's what I actually came to apologize for, I said, returning to my original purpose. I'm sorry I let this charade continue for so long. I'm sorry I doubted my instincts when every sign pointed to betrayal. I'm sorry I trusted my husband to honor our vows and manage our finances with integrity. I pulled out a printed document from my purse one I'd prepared that afternoon, and I'm very sorry to inform you that as the legal managing member of Hearth and Harbor Wellness LLC, I'll be exercising my rights immediately. The soft opening is canceled. The business accounts will be frozen pending legal review, and any attempt to access the Market Street property will be considered trespassing. You can't do that, Tessa shrieked, her composed facade finally shattering. I've worked for months on this. I have contracts, vendors, clients booked. Then you should have made sure you actually owned the business, I replied, instead of building it on someone else's stolen money and forged signature. Brandon stood again, his face red with rage. You're destroying everything out of spite. No, I said calmly. I'm reclaiming what's mine. You destroyed everything out of greed and desire. I turned to Nolan, whose quiet fury was more unsettling than any shouting could be. I have a meeting with my attorney tomorrow at 9 a.m. Maris Lang at Lang & Doyle. You might want to schedule your own consultation. He nodded once, definitively. We're done here, he told Tessa. Pack a bag. You're not staying in my house tonight. Nolan, please, we can talk about this. Tessa's voice broke, tears finally spilling over. We'll talk through lawyers, he said, already heading for the door. Julia, thank you for the truth. I'm sorry it came to this. Brandon grabbed my arm as I moved to leave. You think you've won, I'll fight this. No judge will believe. I shrugged off his grip. Every document has digital fingerprints. Every transaction has a trail. Every message has metadata. You didn't just leave evidence. Brandon, you created a prosecutable case file. I looked at both of them one last time, the man who'd vowed to love me, the woman who'd helped him betray that vow. The apology you wanted. Consider it delivered. As I walked to my car, I heard Brandon's voice rising behind me, Tessa's sobs, Nolan's car door slamming. The sound of consequences finally arriving. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I'd sit in Maris Lang's office and begin the legal dismantling of their scheme. But tonight, I'd delivered something more satisfying than any court victory. I'd apologized exactly as requested with evidence, receipts, and the kind of truth that sets you free. Saturday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I sat across from Maris Lang in her corner office at Lang & Doyle. She was everything my friend had promised, mid-50s with silver hair pulled into a power bun, reading glasses that she wielded like a weapon, and the kind of presence that made courtrooms nervous. Walk me through this again, she said, studying the LLC documents I'd printed. Your husband used your information without consent to establish this entity. Correct. He forged my electronic signature, used my social security number, and listed me as managing member with 90% ownership. I pulled up the DocuSign audit trail on my tablet. Here's the IP address trace, matching his devices. Maris made notes in precise shorthand. And the capital contribution, $85,000 from our joint savings, structured in multiple transfers to avoid reporting requirements. I showed her the bank statements, each withdrawal highlighted. He had access because we shared finances, but these transfers were made without my knowledge or consent. This is remarkably thorough documentation, Maris observed, a hint of approval in her voice. Most clients come in with feelings. You've brought me facts. I've had practice distinguishing between the two, I said. My husband spent months telling me my feelings were wrong. The facts, however, don't lie. She pulled up the Ohio Revised Code on her computer. Operating agreement fraud is serious. Using someone's identity for business formation without consent, that's identity theft. The structured transfers could trigger federal investigation. She looked at me over her glasses. Are you prepared for this to potentially become criminal? I'm prepared for whatever's necessary to reclaim what's mine. Good. Maris pulled out a legal pad. Here's our three-pronged strategy. She drew a diagram as she spoke. First, we file a UCC financing statement immediately. This creates a public record of your interest in the LLC and prevents any asset transfers. Second, we notify all relevant parties, the landlord, bank, vendors, that you are the sole authorized managing member and any other representation is fraudulent. Third, we present Brandon with a settlement proposal. You keep 100% of the LLC assets in exchange for dropping potential criminal charges. What about the divorce? I asked. That's where this gets interesting. Maris smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Because the LLC is technically in your name, it's your separate property. The $85,000 he stole. We argue that's marital waste. He can't dissipate joint assets for an affair partner. We'll demand full reimbursement plus the remaining marital assets as compensation. Can we really prove the affair connection? The timeline speaks for itself. LLC formed 3 weeks ago. Messages between them discussing the investment dating back months. Her name on vendor contracts despite having no legal ownership. A first-year law student could connect these dots. She pulled up a template on her screen. I'm drafting the cease and desist now. By Monday morning, Brandon and Ms. Grant will receive formal notice that any attempt to access the business premises or accounts constitutes fraud. We're also filing for an emergency restraining order to prevent them from destroying evidence or assets. How quickly can this move? I asked. I'll have documents ready by Monday. The UCC filing happens today. I'll handle it electronically. The bank will be notified Monday morning when they open. She pulled out a business card. This is Jake Morrison, our investigator. He'll serve papers personally to ensure receipt. My phone buzzed. Brandon, where are you? We need to talk. Don't respond, Maris instructed. From now on, all communication goes through me. If he shows up at your home, you call the police. Document everything. Save every text, voicemail, email. What about the wellness center? There's a soft opening scheduled for next weekend. Maris's smile turned predatory. Perfect timing. Monday morning, we'll have the locks changed, security code updated. We'll post legal notice that the business is under new management yours. Any bookings or contracts, Ms. Grant made without authority become void. She'll claim she was acting as Brandon's agent, that he had authority as my spouse. Except spouses can't unilaterally create businesses in their partner's name. Ohio law is clear on this. He had no power of attorney, no written authorization, nothing. Every document he signed as you is forgery. She typed rapidly. Building the case file. The Market Street property, the lease is in your name. According to the documents, yes. Then, you're the only one who can authorize access. We'll notify the property management company Monday. They'll issue new keys only to you. She paused. Have you thought about what you want to do with the business? Honestly, I'm considering running it, I said. I have design experience. I could rebrand it completely, make it actually profitable. Or sell it, Maris suggested. The equipment and inventory alone are worth $40,000. The lease is below market rate. Someone would buy the turnkey operation. Either way, it's my choice now. Exactly. She closed the file. Brandon played himself. By putting everything in your name to avoid liability or taxes. He gave you complete control. His fraud becomes your freedom. She handed me a retainer agreement. $5,000 to start. We'll likely recover all fees from Brandon in the settlement. I signed immediately. What about Tessa? Can she come after me? For what she has no legal standing, no ownership documents, no contracts in her name. She's just someone who received stolen money to play entrepreneur. If anyone has liability, it's her for receiving fraudulent transfers. Brandon will try to claim I authorized everything after the fact, that I'm only objecting now out of spite. Let him try. Maris interrupted. Retroactive authorization requires explicit consent. You filed a police report for identity theft, correct? I'm doing that after this meeting? Good. That creates a contemporaneous record of objection. Combined with the evidence of his affair, no judge will believe you suddenly decided to fund his girlfriend's business. She stood, extending her hand. Ms. Hart, you're about to own a wellness center. How does that feel? Like justice, I said, shaking firmly. By Monday afternoon, the locks will be changed. Tuesday morning, we'll do a walkthrough of your new property. Bring a camera, we'll document everything for evidence and insurance purposes. As I left her office, my phone showed 17 missed calls from Brandon, 12 from Tessa. I blocked both numbers and drove to the police station. The next phase was beginning. The soft opening of Hearth and Harbor Wellness was supposed to happen at Tinamum on Saturday. Tessa had sent elegant invitations to local influencers, wellness bloggers, and potential high-end clients. She'd arranged for a caterer, a yoga demonstration, and essential oil consultations. What she hadn't arranged for was the new owner me arriving at 8:45 a.m. with a locksmith, my attorney, and a court officer. The scene was almost theatrical. Tessa stood at the entrance in a flowing white dress, arranging welcome bags filled with branded merchandise she had no right to distribute. Brandon was helping her, carrying boxes from their car, both of them acting like the last week hadn't happened. They froze when they saw us approaching. "You need to leave," Tessa said immediately, her voice pitched high with panic. "This is a private event. You're trespassing." Maris stepped forward, calm as a frozen lake. "Actually, Ms. Grant, you're the one trespassing. My client owns this establishment." She handed Tessa the formal notice, then one to Brandon. "As of 9 a.m. Monday, all locks were changed and access codes updated per the legal owner's instructions. Your presence here is unauthorized." "This is insane!" Brandon exploded. "Julia, you can't do this. We invested everything." "You invested everything," I corrected. "Specifically, you invested my identity and our money without my consent. The documentation is quite clear." The locksmith was already at work, installing a new smart lock system. The court officer stood nearby, ensuring no interference. Through the glass doors, I could see the beautiful space exposed brick walls, soft lighting, treatment rooms waiting for clients who would never arrive under Tessa's management. "I have vendors coming," Tessa said desperately. "Clients booked. The yoga instructor will be here in 20 minutes. "Then you'd better start making calls," I said, pulling out the tablet with the new system controls. "The access code just changed. See?" I held up the screen showing the property management app. "Owner Julia Hart, authorized users none." A catering van pulled up. The driver started unloading boxes of organic smoothies and acai bowls. Maris intercepted him with practiced efficiency. "This delivery was ordered under fraudulent pretenses. Please reload your vehicle. Send any cancellation invoices to Lang & Doyle." She handed him her card. The caterer looked confused but complied. Word would spread quickly through Maple Ridge's small business network. Hearth and Harbor's opening was canceled, and ownership was disputed. "You vindictive bitch!" Tessa snarled, her wellness guru composure finally cracking completely. "You're destroying this out of jealousy. I'm protecting my assets from theft," I replied evenly. Every supply, every piece of equipment, every branded item in that building was purchased with money stolen from my accounts. Cars were arriving the invited guests for the soft opening. A local lifestyle blogger I recognized got out, camera ready, then hesitated seeing the scene. Maris approached each arrival, explaining briefly that the event was canceled due to ownership transition. Brandon grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. "Julia, please, let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out." The court officer stepped forward. "Sir, please don't touch her." Brandon released me, his face red. "This is my wife, who has an active restraining order application against you," Maris interjected. "Would you like to add violation to your current legal troubles?" That stopped him cold. The restraining order was precautionary, but he didn't know that. More vendors arrived: a massage therapist, an aromatherapy consultant, a juice bar operator who'd planned to set up a tasting station. Each was turned away by Maris, who collected their contact information for potential future collaboration with new management. "I spent months planning this," Tessa said, tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "Every detail, every contact, every vision board, with someone else's money," I reminded her. "Your vision was built on fraud. Your dreams were financed by theft." Nolan arrived then, parking his sedan next to the chaos. He observed the scene with clinical detachment, the way he might audit a particularly messy account. "Tessa," he said quietly, "we need to go." "Nolan, help me," she pleaded. "Tell them this isn't right." "What isn't right is you conducting an affair while building a business with another woman's stolen money." His voice was flat, emotionless. "We're leaving. Now." She looked between Brandon and Nolan, realizing neither could save her. The business she'd dreamed of, planned for, already promoted on Instagram, was evaporating like morning mist. I walked to the door, using my new access code to enter. The space was beautiful. Tessa had good taste. I'd give her that. Treatment rooms with heated massage tables, a meditation space with Himalayan salt walls, a reception area with living walls of succulents. All of it purchased with my money, now returned to my control. "There's over 30,000 in bookings," Tessa called out desperately. "Deposits paid, contracts signed? Send the documentation to my attorney," I said. "If they're legitimate, I'll honor them under new management. If they're not..." I shrugged. Maris was photographing everything, creating an inventory. The court officer ensured Brandon and Tessa maintained distance. The small crowd of would-be guests had dispersed, already texting and posting about the drama. I found the main circuit breaker and flipped it. The lights went out. The soft meditation music stopped. The essential oil diffusers powered down. The wellness center went dark. "You wanted me to apologize," I said, emerging from the building and locking it behind me. "Here's my apology. I'm sorry you thought you could steal from me and face no consequences. I'm sorry you believed my husband's lies about having authority over my identity. And I'm deeply sorry that your grand opening has become your grand closing." The locksmith finished installing the new system, handing me the only set of keys and access cards. "All done, Ms. Hart. No one gets in without your personal authorization." Brandon stood there, deflated, watching his investment girlfriend's dreams shatter. "Jules, my lawyer will send the divorce papers to yours." I cut him off. "The settlement offer is simple walk away with nothing, or face criminal prosecution for fraud. You have 72 hours to decide." 3 weeks later, I sat in the conference room at Lang & Doyle, watching Brandon sign the divorce settlement with a shaking hand. He'd lost weight. His executive confidence replaced by something hollow and defeated. His lawyer, a tired-looking man who'd clearly advised against fighting, reviewed each page with him one final time. "Initial here," the lawyer instructed. "This confirms you understand you're relinquishing all claims to Hearth and Harbor Wellness, LLC." Brandon's pen scratched across the paper. Each initial was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, another admission of his fraud. "Sign here. This acknowledges the dissolution of joint assets, with Ms. Hart retaining the home and all remaining savings as compensation for marital waste." Another signature. His hand trembled slightly. "And finally, sign here. This confirms you will not pursue any claims against Ms. Hart and will accept responsibility for all legal fees incurred." The final signature. Brandon set down the pen and looked at me for the first time since entering the room. "I hope you're happy." "I'm free," I corrected. "That's better than happy." Maris gathered the documents efficiently. "The decree will be final in 30 days. Mr. Cole, you have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from the marital home. A court officer will supervise." Brandon stood to leave, then paused. "The business won't succeed without Tessa. She had the vision, the connections. Then she should have used her own money and identity to build it," I said. "As it turns out, I have my own vision." He left without another word. Through the window, I watched him get into his car, a lease he'd now have to handle alone. Tessa wasn't waiting for him. Their grand romance had crumbled the moment the money disappeared and legal consequences arrived. Last I'd heard, she'd left Maple Ridge entirely, moving back to Chicago to escape the humiliation. Nolan had sent me a brief email the week before. "Divorce filed. Thank you for the truth. The wellness center is yours by right. Make something good from it." And I intended to. The next morning, I stood in my wellness center, truly mine now, with Rachel Chen, a talented manager I'd hired from a successful spa in Columbus. We walked through the space, discussing the rebrand. "New name, obviously," I said. "I'm thinking Clarity Wellness. Seems appropriate." Rachel laughed. "Perfect. What about the service menu? Keep the massage therapy and meditation. Drop the intuitive healing and aura cleansing Tessa had planned." Add legitimate services partner with licensed therapists, nutritionists, maybe a dermatologist. Make it medical adjacent rather than purely spiritual. Exactly. Real wellness, not just expensive incense. We spent the morning planning new color schemes, updated marketing materials, a fresh website. Every trace of Tessa's vision would be erased, replaced with something built on integrity rather than deception. The bank representative arrived at noon to finalize the business accounts. Ms. Hart, with the remaining capital and equipment value, you have approximately $92,000 in total assets. More than I'd started with, despite the legal fees. Brandon's attempt to steal from me had somehow resulted in a net gain poetic justice in its purest form. I'll need a business credit line, I said, and merchant services for the new point-of-sale system. With your assets and business plan, that won't be a problem. As I signed the papers, my real signature, my actual name, I thought about the months of gaslighting, the careful manipulation, the attempted financial abuse. Brandon had tried to erase me, to fund his affair with my identity and money. Instead, he'd handed me a business and his portion of our assets. The smart lock chimed as I tested my access card again. The system recognized me immediately. Welcome, Julia Hart, owner. Owner, not wife, not victim, not the jealous woman Brandon had tried to paint me as. Owner. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then saw the preview. Julia, it's Tessa. I opened it fully. I know you hate me, but I need that job at the wellness center. I have nothing left. Please. The audacity was almost admirable. I screenshot the message for my attorney, then blocked the number. Some bridges, once burned, illuminate the path forward with their flames. That evening, I sat in my apartment mine alone, now reviewing the business plan. The soft opening would happen in 6 weeks. This time, legitimately. This time, built on truth rather than lies. I pulled out the list Brandon had made me memorize for my apology. Acknowledge your jealousy is unfounded. Admit you've been projecting your insecurities. Take responsibility for creating tension. I'd followed his script perfectly, just not the way he'd intended. I'd acknowledged the jealousy was founded, admitted they were projecting their guilt onto me, and taken responsibility for ending their tension permanently. The business license hung on my home office wall, my name bold and clear as the sole proprietor. Below it, I'd framed the email Brandon had sent with his apology talking points. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you, it's succeeding with what they tried to steal. The next morning, I unlocked Clarity Wellness for the contractor team. The renovation would take a month, erasing every trace of Tessa's aesthetic. As the workers began demolition, tearing down her carefully selected wallpaper, I stood in what would become my office. My phone rang. Maris Lang. Julia, thought you should know. Brandon's attorney just confirmed he won't contest anything. Also, Tessa tried to file a civil suit for the business. It was rejected immediately, no standing. Thanks for the update. How does it feel? She asked. To sign your own name on your own business. I looked at the business cards I'd just ordered. Julia Hart, owner and CEO, Clarity Wellness. Like I'm finally writing my own story, I said. And this time, no one else is holding the pen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Your perspectives mean everything to me.